Hello and welcome to episode number 25 of the Curling Legends podcast. My name's Kevin Palmer, and each week through the curling season, I share a conversation with a player or storyteller from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, covering curling from the invention of the slide through to the adoption of the free guard zone. Arnold Asham is on the show today. If you are a regular listener to the show, then thank you for that. Please remember to let family and friends who may be interested know about the show. If you're new to the podcast, then thanks for joining. And just a reminder, there are 24 other podcasts that you can download from iTunes or on any number of apps for your smartphone. You can also find us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/curlinglegends or our website, curlinglegends.ca. If you like curling and you like podcasts, then I'd also like to recommend to you From the Hack. This is a weekly podcast where Frank Rock has interviews with players and people in the game, as well as updates on recent events. If you haven't yet, you should also check out Two Girls in a Game, where Lori and Mary chat about recent events and the goings-on within the curling community and often have special guests. Their most recent episode includes Richard Hart, so you should check that out. I'd like to thank Jerry Gertz and Curling Zone for sponsoring the podcast, and again, Steve Lobel, who provides the artwork, and Mark Rogman, who provided the music. Arnold Asham, the founder of Asham Curling Supplies, is many things. Arnold's an inventor, he's a curler, he's a dancer, he's definitely a showman, and you'll hear in his own words that he believes he's also an opportunist. Anyone who's been to major events over the last many decades will often run into Arnold, and if you're lucky, you'll catch him sing a song or do a jig for you. He actually sings us one of his crowd favorites about midway through our conversation. I was lucky enough to sit down with Arnold a few months back during the Worlds in Edmonton. So we recorded a conversation in his hotel room. It's a great conversation. Arnold touches on many topics, including his early days growing up, struggling financially at the time with his family and having to overcome many things, and talks a lot about, as well, his passion for the game and what it may require for the sport to move forward. And he talks about his upbringing and what he's trying to do to help support the Aboriginal communities today. Something he's very proud of, and a really good conversation, and a bit of a history lesson as well. But certainly a lot of humor, a lot of stories. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as much as I did. Here is my conversation with Arnold Asham.
Getting back to Sean Grassie's book, there's a chapter in there with Asham. I was the oldest skip at 58. I'm not sure whether he mentioned it in the book or not, but yeah. I know I was the oldest skip at 58 to win the MCA Bonspiel back in the days when there was over 400 teams, and we went 17-1. Nathan was throwing last rock on one side, and I was throwing last rock on the other side, and I skipped both sides. And we had Sean McCutcheon and James Fulcher, and Dean North was fifth for us, but he played a few games as well. So
now, did you have yourself in the Calcutta?
I think we had ourselves in the Calcutta as well. I usually did anyway. Yeah. I used to auction off all the Calcuttas.
Did you? Oh, so you used to do you have auctioneer skills then?
Well, here we go there now. Yeah. What are you going to get for him? There was a boy from Arkansas. So, yeah, I used to do auction off teams, and I'd auction a team, tell a joke, auction a team, tell a joke. And so I did a few of the curling pubs. So
you'd actually do different clubs, not just the own club you were playing at. They would bring you in and...
No, I never really did the club I was playing in, because I played at Stony Mountain for 20 years, and they only had 3 or 4 teams entered, so there was no Calcutta. So we would join the Calcutta with CFB, and so I auctioneered the CFB for, probably 15, 20 years, and then when CFB closed, I went over to the Thistle and did the Valor Road, actually. And then I bought the Valor Road Club.
Okay, that's right. I heard. Okay, I didn't even have that in the notes, but I remember hearing that. Yeah, and when was that? What year was that?
Well, the Valor Road Club was struggling way back when, and I was going to buy it, and was really, really serious about buying it and passionate about buying it, because I was spending 3 or 4 days a week there, 3 or 4 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week there practicing anyway. So, but they formed a sort of a coup there. Gunnison and a few of the other members, and because Gunnison's dad had bought it at him too, so it was a little bit political, and they decided they were going to run it for a few years, and after 2 years they sort of realized that they weren't interested in it either. So they came back to me again. But in the meantime, I had sort of semi-retired from curling, so it wasn't nearly as big of a passion. And I also ended up meeting a girl in Yorkton that I spent 8 years with. So I was out of town quite a bit, and we bought it, but didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. And then when the thistle burned down, we those nonprofit organizations, you have to give the money away. So they only got like $300,000 insurance for the thistle. And so I ended up selling them Valor Road for $250,000, which was probably worth at least half of $750,000.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But again, they were going to keep it as a curling club, so what's best for curling, I let it be.
Well, I mean, there must have been people, so let's go back a little ways. We won't go right back to your birth, but at some point you probably told family members or friends or said, I'm going to get invested and make money in curling, and somebody must have thought you were crazy. Sure, were there people back in the day that said, why would you want to run back in the 70s that would say, why would you want to try to make money in curling? Or were there people making money in curling at the time?
I started curling when I was 13.
Yeah. I lived in the early 60s.
Yeah, 63. So I was born in 50. I started curling in 63, and I got a call from a neighbor asking me if I wanted to curl, and I said, well, I can't. First of all, I didn't have a ride. And he said, I can pick you up. And I said, well, I got no money. He said, I'll pay your annual fee. So I said, okay, well, if you pick me up and pay, I'll play.
Had you ever thrown a rock before?
I hadn't, no. He just needed a player. So, and I lived a mile from him, or a mile and a half.
Whereabouts?
It was Archie Moore. Reedy Creek. I lived in we always say it was a poor area, right between Ebb and Flow and Sandy Bay, welfare strip. We didn't have a car. We didn't have hydro. If I didn't have a heart on a Christmas, I had nothing to play.
Yeah.
You can edit that. We never had sawed our own wood, no chainsaw really, and did everything with horses. So when I started to curl, I was like, oh my God, it was amazing. And I curled for about a year or two, and then we got transferred to Amaranth, and I won the divisional bonspiel with my girl here. Mm-hmm. Val, high school sweetheart. Yeah. But anyway, that's how I got started, and moved to Portage when I was about 19 and played there.
So what took you to Portage? Just
my parents moved to Portage, and I still had a year of school left. Well, I had taken grade 12 in Amaranth, but I had taken it again in Portage.
Now, were you did you have a bug at this point about curling? Like you were?
Oh yeah, big time.
To it? Yeah.
I could talk curling for hours and hours. It didn't matter with who. I remember this lady by Doris Clark. She was about my age, 66 or whatever. She was in her 60s anyway. Doris Clark, and she lived in Verdun. And we went to the Oilman's bonspiel in Verdun, and I was like 21, 22 years old. And I sat up with her till 4 o'clock in the morning talking curling.
Really?
From about 11 o'clock at night, everybody else went to bed. I could just talk curling forever.
Did you always like the older ladies, or this was just the beginning? And
No, I just started. Just kidding. No.
Yeah. And so you just got into a conversation with her just because you just...
We were staying at her house, actually, and her and her husband lived there, and everybody kind of went to bed, and her and I just sat and chatted and had a few drinks and talked curling until 3 or 4 in the morning. But she was a level 2 or 3 instructor for Curl Canada, so I was intrigued by how much she knew about curling.
So that would have been by the early 70s then. So were you...
And the other guy that had a big influence on my life before we move on is Portage La Prairie. I got hooked up with Don Brownwich, and again, I could sit and chat with him for days talking about curling, and we did. And it became a lifelong friendship till he died.
So when you mean talk about curling, talk about what? Like, what would you discuss about?
Oh, just strategy, and when I'm coming home, and when Don coming home, and all the stuff that you talked about, like percentages of winning, and who was the best, and what second was the best, and the in-turn, the out-turn, and the grips, and the hacks, and we just talked about every single thing. And the whole game intrigued me. I was extremely passionate about it from the time I was ever introduced to it. I remember even the first game, I make a double, I think, and it was like, whoa, shit, I might be good at this game. I might make a living at this game. Yeah. No.
Did you? So, okay. So, got to know this one. What was the first? What was the first pair of shoes you wore?
Even going back to high school, I'll go to that first pair of shoes. Even going back to high school, though, I remember one of my yearbooks, reading it years later, I was going to be a millionaire and I was going to make my money in the sports industry. I didn't know what. My first pair of shoes would have been those felt boots, Richardson felt boots.
The Ernie Richardsons? Okay,
Ernie Richardson's were leather, I think. The felt boot was even before the Ernie Richardson. So that was my first boot with, wasn't even Teflon. It was neoprene on one foot, and you wore toe rubber on the other foot for grip, and you slid along with your corn brooms and swept it.
How was your slide back then? I'm assuming you
that's one of the things, one of the times I lied. I went to school in Portage, and of course, coming from Reedy Creek and Amaranth, we never really got much instruction, so we didn't really know how to slide. And I had my foot out here, and I was sliding like Marshall. Just kidding. Originally,
I might have for a while.
Too much bull.
Oh, careful.
But anyway, I didn't really know how to slide, so when I got to Portage, I was a pretty good curler because we'd already won the divisionals in our area, so out in that whole area.
The schoolboy competition?
We were getting into the schoolboy competition. That was the first year. But I went to PCI, and I love curling, so I joined the curling team, of course. And he put the teams together, and then when we started practicing, I saw these guys had great deliveries, and I'm still pretty lousy, so I actually lied and said I just switched from a tuck to a flat foot. So
as a way to,
as I improved my flat foot, I became okay. But those guys, I still think to this day maybe don't realize, or maybe I don't. Maybe I'm too stupid to realize they did, and just knew I wasn't very good. But anyway, I skipped the second team, and Harvey Fleming skipped the first team. We went on to do better than the first team. We lost out to the fours of the. And then Bill Henry, the schoolboy, was in Portage that year. Bill Henry came to the schoolboy, and I was his driver.
So sorry, what do you mean the MCA and the school? You mean so that was the MCA? You said the MCA.
Oh no, the
you mean the schoolboy bonspiel?
I got down to the fourth schoolboy bonspiel.
Okay, which at that time was how many? It was
oh
pretty
my
big.
God, it was a couple hundred rinks. I think.
Yeah, because that would have been about 71.
I would have 69.
69? Okay, yeah. And then I assume you probably was that the first Briar you saw, and the one in Winnipeg? You went to watch the 70 Briar?
I did go to see some of that. Yeah, there was Paul Savage, I remember, and George Fink. Of course, the big Bob Pickering from Saskatchewan. So I went to maybe a game or two of that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Briar's expensive. And
was it? Yeah.
No, the Briars are expensive. And at that time, you couldn't afford it. I mean, I don't know how I even got to go to 2 or 3 draws. And that's the first I remember. But I didn't even remember that Briar. The first Briar I went to was 1980 in Calgary, as far as I know. But I've forgotten about that one. And I did go to some of that. I also went to Muhammad Ali and Fraser.
Okay, yeah.
In the arena. Those are the ones I didn't miss. Sorry.
Yeah.
I love boxing also.
Yeah.
But the first shoes, but even after, within years of the first shoes, I remember buying big, wide shoes and putting sliders on them because I felt that the wider the shoe, the more stable it was. So even in those days, I didn't wear traditional shoes. I would just go to Penniless or whatever, I don't know, whatever the hell it'd be called, just any shoe store, and buy a pair of shoes with a flat sole that had a real wide sole, and I would put a wide slider on them, and I thought I was inventing back then.
So were you a bit of a tinkerer or an inventor or somebody like to just look at things a little differently?
Huge, and still, totally. We never made a jacket, but if other people can make jackets, we can make them.
Well, where did that start? Like, was it specifically curling, or was there something else even in your background? You were industrious as a kid.
No, I think my dad instilled that in us. I remember he used to bring nails home from construction. He used to work in construction in Brandon, and he'd never bring straight nails home. All the ones that were bent, when you're building, you bend nails and you take them out and throw them in the ground. He'd pick up all the nails every night on the ground, put them in a pail, and he'd bring them home every weekend. And our job was to straighten these nails, and we'd be with the anvil and the hammer straightening nails. And one thing I will say is you were always successful. You always straightened 10 or 12 nails. You might get tired of it.
Yeah.
You would never straighten 100 maybe, but you were always successful. And so I'd figure out even better ways to straighten nails. And he used to tell us it's the way you held your tongue, because you'd try and hold the nail and it would turn when you hammer it. But anyway, I grew up thinking if somebody else could do it, I could do it. And I used to look at renovate houses and look at houses and see, how the eave troughs were, put up the eave troughs.
Yeah.
I never had to really learn anything, but I still did. I mean, when I wanted to learn how to play bridge, I took all the bridge lessons, and same with curling lessons. I'm a level 3 instructor. I took lessons right from the time I started.
When you were young, coming up curling, was there anyone that was a mentor to you then, or someone that you watched? Or
Benson, Billy Walsh, all those guys were all Hunter, not so much, but because he was a bit of an attitude. He was Rod the God. I mean, he never really talked to people. So Orest and all those guys they were all heroes. I'd go to the curling club and stand at the door down the stairs and look through the window and watch how they threw the first rock. Just see whether they're going to put up a guard or whether they're going to put it in the house, because it was always back those days no free guard zone or anything. And are these guys going to go after each other? Are they going to play defense or so? And I always wanted to see the first rock where it went. I mean, now I don't, but anyway, I was always an inventor, yes, absolutely. If you look at the shoes, most people don't even know about the invention where you put the slider on the heel of the grip foot. So is when you're practicing. I got to try and get it to Gushu with his bad hip. I know that bad hip is from putting all the weight on his sliding foot all the time. You throw the rock and you slide back down, you get another rock, throw it, and you slide back down, you get another rock and throw it, and he's always got his foot like this with pushing like this and all the weight on this hip and turn to the side. I can give one push and just lift, and so does Nathan and a bunch of other people I know now because I've showed them. I got a slider on the back of my heel, and you just turn it up like this,
on the right,
and then you can put your weight on both feet when you're sliding back, and you don't have to have your body crooked, and you don't have to have all the weight on your one foot. So I got to talk to Gushu about that, but that's just starting. The slider on the heel.
So this is something you just thought up when? How long ago?
I've been used for years.
Oh, okay.
I've never really marketed it. It's just. But you start there. Then you go to the toe dip was my invention. And the way I invented that was totally accident. I was still using the corn broom back in those days. I took the plastic off the corn broom, and I guess I didn't throw it far enough as I went to take my first practice slide. And my foot caught the plastic as I was sliding out, and I went, ooh. I mean, I knew I drifted, went sideways. Yeah. But the feeling was...
Oh, your back sliding foot caught on the...
So now all of a sudden I start... I went and got an extra shoe because I was already in the business. I got an extra shoe and I tied it to my ankle with a slider forward, and I slid out, and man, it was like, I went, holy. So I started putting the lace cover. So the heel, the lace cover, the toe dip, the red brick, the rotator slider. The only thing I didn't invent on the shoes was the Balance Plus. And the Balance Plus was only a correction to a bad shoe. Shoes are made to run on the balls of your feet. You got a ball and it rolls around the table. You cut a hole in it. Where will that stop? It'll stop on that. So now we made our own dyes, our own molds for the soles. We're the only ones with a curling sole. We've spent $30,000-$40,000 to make our own molds. So we made it thicker on the outside, thin in the middle. So as the outside touch before the middle. But on a normal dress shoe or a tennis shoe, which most of these guys use, there's the ball of the foot. It's made for the ball of the foot. So when you cut a hole in that ball, yes, it will give you more stability. So all really the Balance Plus is a correction to a bad shoe.
Yeah.
It's good, and we're now using even the circular slider, like the old horseshoe slider. But you start right there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, 6 inventions just on the shoes alone, and then you start with even the slider on the knee, but the name on the knee, the names on the shoulders. Jackets, we were the first with jackets. We were the first with curling pants. People used to call me, your curling pants are friggin' gay, but at least they were curling pants. No, but they had the rocks and the brooms up the sides, and, but they were the first curling pants, the first with jackets. We were the first with almost everything. Everybody copied.
So would you say that you were maybe non-conforming? Was that it? Was it more that you were trying to, or you were just looking to improve on anything that you saw at any?
Well, first of all, I've always believed, and it's just like I've always believed, if you do the same thing as everybody else, you have to compete with everybody else. You have to out-advertise them. You have to outwork them. You have to out-manufacture them. You have to out-everything. But if you do things different from everybody else, you don't have to compete against anybody. And it so shows up in the curling with the Richardsons when they started peeling. Everybody hated them. Right? Because they changed the game completely from this draw game and exciting game to peel, and they won everything. Mm-hmm. Then it goes to Gausel. Just an example. Gausel gets the push brooms. He wins everything for a year or two until Lukowicz all of a sudden catches on, and then Lukowicz comes to Winnipeg to the Worlds in 78 with the push brooms, and he wins everything. So everybody starts using push brooms, and Gausel's no longer to be found, right? Mm-hmm. That goes forever. Even DeBlond, for example, with the corner guard. And
so you're attributing the DeBlonds to the corner guard, or
the DeBlonds, as far as I'm concerned, corner
okay.
Guard.
No, because I've talked to lots of people about this, and a lot of people want to take credit for the use of the corner guard or how it was used. I mean, Ron Northcott talked about using it, and then I've heard people attribute it to Terry Bronstein, and I've heard people attribute, and then the guys out in Ontario like to talk about Alfie Phillips Jr. and that kind of thing. So So what was the way that the Blondes were they just sort of using it differently, or what was it kind of their strategy?
Rather than, if you didn't have hammer, you drew to the button. Yeah. If you had hammer, you drew to the side. But you always put the rock in and wait for somebody to miss it. Mm-hmm. Well, the Blonde started putting, you'd pull up short on the odd draw, and he'd see, holy shit, next thing you know, he wins, he gets a 3, so they started using the corner guard as far as I know. No, but I can go back to example after example after example. Pat Ryan with his peeling, with his, So even in curling, if you do the same as everybody else, you have to compete with everybody else. But if you do things different, you don't compete with anybody. Furby won 5 friggin' Canadian championships in a row by starting to go around everything.
Yeah.
When guys were all peeling yet, with the free guards only.
Four in a row, actually.
Sorry?
Lost that
4.
one. It seemed like he should have won 5.
Oh, yeah,
They had that one sort of miraculous comeback.
Jones won 5 at the same time as he was winning 4, yeah.
With kind of a different strategy, because Colleen was pretty much a hit and make things simple kind of strategy, and that worked for a long time.
Yeah. So even in this game, so right now, just to jump forward, fast forward, I just set a new goal to win an Olympic gold medal when I'm 72 in 2022.
Okay.
I've recruited Kyle Dowering to begin with, off Dunstan's team. We then talked about who we were going to pick next, and that was Colton Lott and was it? Oh yeah, Rob Gordon.
Okay.
Which is Dunstan's old team. First thing he wanted to do was get back Dunstan, so we approached Dunstan. But we also, and again, I think way outside the box. I think Hackner could play lead, still 63 years old.
Yeah.
Throw the out turn all year long and just draw, and skip those 3 young kids and win. We talked to Furby, we talked to Nedohin. Pat Simmons is the guy we got, but we were thinking of Simmons right at the beginning, but we didn't know other Simmons would be there, so we put a lot of feelers out. And now we're going to take the full-time curling approach. I coached professional baseball for a couple of years with Winnipeg Gold Eyes.
Okay, yeah.
And then I took some of the Gold Eyes to Moose Jaw, and I was the manager out at Moose Jaw. And and we went to the field at noon, did our long tosses, our runs, and our stretches, and whatever. And then maybe at noon we'd have our infields with all our nets up and our screens. Then we'd break for supper about 5 o'clock, and then we'd have our game infield at 6 o'clock, and then at 7:30 we'd start the game, and by the time we were finished the game, it was 10:30, and then we'd have our showers, and by the time we were brought in our pizza and had supper, it was midnight. So we were at the field for 12 hours a day. Jeff Stoughton is the best curler the Manitoba's ever seen. You know how much time he spent curling? 1 hour a day at the Granite. He practiced every day, but he practiced more than anybody else, and that's why he was the best. What you put in is what you get out. Now, Sedin. Hockey.
Well, yeah, we were on to baseball, now we're on to hockey. Okay, let's get back to curling.
Eden is the guy that's winning everything right now, and he's practicing the most. And most of these guys are spending 2, 3, 4 hours a day, maybe.
So how much did you practice coming out? So back when you were in your early 20s?
Yeah, I did practice 3 or 4 hours a day at times. I even rented a curling I even rented a curling club for 3 months after the season ended one year, and I threw 7,500 rocks April, May, June.
And how old were you then? So this would have been...
I was 45.
Oh, okay, that was later. But because I remember, so I came up with David, right? In fact, he was even in junior. He's a couple years behind me.
I was 45 when I played with David.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it was around that time. And I remember because I came up playing against Sean and David. They were just a little bit younger than me. And I actually went to university with David. He was a year behind me in engineering school. And I remember him talking about those early years in men's and then playing with you and just the next level of effort that he put into the game.
Yeah.
And that sort of, for him, really set the skills and ability that propelled him on later. At that point, he moved to Alberta. But, yeah, I mean, you guys had a pretty
David was a prime
incredible run, yeah.
David was a prime example of a smart guy that I knew would win because of the choices he made. First of all, he loved the game, was very passionate about the game, and it was never about, oh my God, we're 2 down or whatever. It was always, we can beat these. It's just, let's make 8 shots, see what happens. And it was always, but also, David was better than, he came and played with me for a reason because he wanted to learn the game and,
that year, so how did that work that year? You were skipping, right?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't know he wanted to throw last rock
at the time.
He started playing with Furby, right? I let him throw last rock.
Yeah.
But in those days, I skipped.
You had a pretty good run. I remember you guys
last.
Were winning a few Bonspiels and you were traveling a bit.
Yeah, we were 5th on the World Curling Tour one year, and we won the World Curling Tour Manitoba Championship and went to Switzerland and won Switzerland. And
at what point did you start not sliding without a broom? And it always seems strange that a guy that would sell brooms would not want to use one while he was sliding.
Well, again, that was accident. I left my sliding broom at the other end once and went to the far end, and there was like a dozen rocks to throw back, and so I just decided to hell I'd throw them without a broom. Felt good, and then I went out and practiced without a broom, felt good, and I got the broom back, and there was something I was doing with the broom that I wasn't doing without a broom, and I felt so much
So you were
better.
compensating somehow with the broom.
Yeah. I was leaning or something on the broom or doing something with it, or even. And so I just, when I would put my foot in a spot where when I didn't use the broom, it was just better. So and then David was again a guy that just said, "Well, fuck, throw without it then."
So that was with him on that squad.
Yeah, he was 100% in favor of me throwing without a broom, so I started throwing without a broom.
And you were clearly a guy that it wouldn't bother you if people thought that was goofy or kind of tease you.
No, I had Bill Hunter here who ran all the big spiels in Saskatoon, who was a good friend of mine, and he said, "You look disabled without a broom." He said, "Christ, throw the broom." I said, "I don't care how I look. I make more shots without it." You look
disabled. I think if you were disabled, you'd be more likely to need a broom or something.
He just meant, it looked odd. But
like you might need some special help when you're getting around the club and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you guys had a pretty good squad, and you had
But again, that's sort of inventive. Most people wouldn't. But when you look at it back look at how many people throw without a broom. Tons do. Horace Malchuk. Broom was up
he
here.
Just holding up
Terry Owens, the broom was up here. Larry, all the tons of guys with that corn broom, they were all up there. So they were basically throwing without a broom. It just wasn't, so I just took my mitt off and held it in my hand and threw it. Same as a lot of guys did, but because they had a broom in their hand, it looked
like a curler.
Looked like I had great balance because I was throwing without it, but.
So we're jumping around a lot, which is fine. It seems like you're a little like Paul Savage was that way, which is good. It's good. I can handle it. Okay, so let's get back into the 70s. So what was the birth of the red brick then? When did that sort of start to take place? What was the tinkering that got you onto the kind of forming the first red brick?
I came to Winnipeg after Portage in 70, and I worked in a bakery for a bit with a good wage. My brother-in-law worked for the government. He told me about this government job that came up, and I should apply for it, so I applied for it. But the wage was like 3/4 of what I was making at the bakery, so even though I got the job, I turned it down. Well, Sandy Maltman, who was the director of mines at the time, called me in, and I met with him, and he told me what an opportunity I was missing, so I quit the bakery and went and worked. And I ended up working with a guy called Don Colpitz, and he was a big curler at St. Vital. And Dean was with him. And,
Dean Kerr?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Dean Kerr was with him. And Al Sadak. And I forget the guy, the lead guy was a guy by Shepherd or something. I still can see him to this day. But anyway, those guys were in A group at St. Vital. And I ended up joining St. Vital with N.I. Spared. And we were playing in C and D or whatever. But I was always, if I could play with Colpitz and those guys, with magic. But anyway, I just kept improving and ended up playing with Dean. And I think the first Bonspiel I ever won, Dean and I both walked down to the other end, and I stood there longer than him. So he went back and played third. But I think
you weren't sure who was going to actually skip. It was
he wanted to skip, and I wanted to skip. But anyway, he went back and played third, and we won the Bonspiel. And that was the last chance in Portage. It was a big Bonspiel. There was guys like Jack Wolf in there who had just won a select, and all the select teams from around that area were in the Bonspiel. Bonspiels were big in those days. I think it was 128 teams, and we won it. And then Dean came and played it again in Lac de Bonnie. We won that, and then we played together for quite a few years. I skipped it. He played third, and then he ended up moving to lead at some point. But yeah, so that's how I got started in Winnipeg. And I was playing in St. Vital, and I ended up getting to A group. And I was then meeting guys like Brian Penson, Billy Walsh, and all those guys. And I was a good player. And Eddie Pratt from St. Vital was the guy that invented the red brick slider. So I heard this slider next to me, and I went, what the hell? You could hear back then the brick was really hard.
And what year would have this been then?
70, that would then be, so it took about 5 years to get to be one of the top curlers in St. Vital. And so that would be around 76 or 7. 77 it would have been. And so I asked Eddie to do my shoe, and if he'd have done my shoe, I may not be here today interviewing.
Okay.
But he was going to charge me $50 at that time. And I mean, my God, that was like $500.
And was he doing this for other people?
He did it for himself, and he was just getting started. He'd done it maybe for 2 or 3 people. So I knew he worked in a printing shop, and it was a printing product.
Yeah.
So I just went to a printing supplier and asked him about it, and he said, oh, yeah. So I got it.
So what do you mean it was a printing product? You're not giving away any kind of Colonel Santa's recipe here now?
Oh, no. Okay. The red brick's done anyway.
Yeah.
It was a strip that was on the bottom of the knife. It was a strip that fit in a groove, and the knife came down in this strip.
Okay.
Bang, 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 and cut the paper. And after a day or two, this strip would be all just chopped up. They would turn it over and it would get chopped up on the other side. Well, Eddie took that used stuff and put it on his shoe, and then he sanded it all down smooth. Well, when I went and bought it, I was buying new stuff. And Eddie had it on long ways, and so when you bent the shoe, it cracked, and so I started doing it whatever way you turned your foot. I went out with guys like Gary Willis and Terry Bronstein and those guys, and had them try it and figured out the best angle to have it at and stuff. So then I did people's shoes for the next few years. 77, 78, I did people's shoes. And then Penston and Billy Walsh and Bronstein and those guys would go to us. I wasn't playing big at that time. I wasn't going to the big bonspiels anyway. They'd go to a bonspiel in Regina or in Saskatoon or something. Mm-hmm. They'd come back, and I would get 5 or 10 pairs of shoes in the mail from Saskatoon, asking me to apply the red brick slider.
And so at this point, people would just take whatever kind of shoe, like a dress shoe or
even the shoe they were wearing, the Bauer shoe.
Okay,
they would send it with the Teflon.
They would take with the Teflon. They just take off the Teflon.
Put red brick on and sand it all down and send it back to them. So I realized at that point, if I ever was going to be do business at any kind of level, I had to have a shoe. So I went to a shoe company. At the time, it was Western Shoes. No, Greb Shoes.
Okay, yeah.
I went to Greb Shoes, and they told me minimum order was 500 pairs. So I went to the bank and talked to the bank, and the bank said, "We'll get back to you." So a week or two, I went back to the bank. He says, "Oh yeah, we've talked to Turnbull, and we've talked to Bronstein, we've talked to whoever, and it sounds like a great idea. And so go ahead, order the shoes." I went ahead and ordered the shoes. Shoes come in the fall. I go back to the bank to sign the documents, and he said, "Oh my God, head office wouldn't go for it." So here I was, 500 pairs of shoes, Asham on them, and I can't get the money. So I actually went and met with them and told them how sorry I was and told them the whole story. And there was nothing we could do. I just felt like I had fool and had really let these shoe people down. So they asked me for a letter, giving them permission to sell shoes with Asham on them.
Okay.
And I gave them a letter giving them permission to sell shoes with Asham on them. And I was telling the story to Dean and Bobby Calder. Dean lent me $2,000. Bobby Calder lends me $2,000. Somebody else lent me $2,000. I could never remember. So with $6,000, I went back to the bank, and the bank said, okay. Meanwhile, Greb Shoes had put the shoes on. The original price was $1,750. They had said, try to clear them out at $14. So I went and bought them at $14. So
you went and bought them back from them. Yeah.
They hadn't sold them yet.
Yeah.
They'd put them on at $14 trying to sell them.
Yeah.
So I got them all.
So you got it for you get them for
$3.50 less than I would have had the bank.
Yeah.
So anyway, the first year I sold, out of the 500 pairs, I sold 350 pairs. I paid back Dean, paid back Bobby, paid back even the bank, I think, and I had all my profits in inventory. And we had a big bedroom. It was the whole. We lived in a story and a half, so the whole upstairs was a bedroom. And it was twice this long. And there were the 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s. And none of them sold, and none of them had sliders on. I owed all my buddies' money and the bank money. And every night when I went to sleep, it was the last thing I saw. And every morning when I woke up, it was the first thing I saw. And anyway, we managed to pull all that off, selling shoes in the living room with Nathan and Mandy running around in diapers, and Katie wasn't even thought of then. And so that year, then I sold, like I say, 350 pairs. And then the next year, I ordered another 500 pairs. So we sold, and they added on. So we sold about 700. The year after, I sold 2,800 pairs. And then I quit my job, went full time. We sold 8,000 pairs. The year after, we sold 15,000 pairs, and that was the most we ever sold. In 1981 or 2 was the most shoes we ever sold. Everybody wanted the brick slider, and Wernick was wearing it, and Hackner, and everybody. Yeah. And there's a good story for you with Hackner, won in our shoe in 1982. Then Bauer comes along and offers him a contract. 3-year contract. He wears Bauer shoes for 3 years, doesn't win anything. Goes back to ours in 1985 and wins again. So it was perfect.
That's a good story to tell. Yeah.
That was a good story.
Yeah.
And we still laugh about it to this day, and he's still a devoted Asham guy.
Since we are in a hotel room across from the the World Curling with the Canada about to play in about an hour.
No, it's all good. We don't have to be there on time anyway. So I want to talk for at least another 2 hours.
They're playing that. What's that guy's name again? If Canada's playing Sweden, what's that guy's name again?
Oh, Eden.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Sorry, what? Yeah,
Eden.
Sedin.
Sedin. Yeah, he's playing Sedin.
And then you also started a relationship at that point with Carrie Burtnick, right? Didn't Carrie even work for you for a little bit? And
all those guys over the years worked for me. And Mert Thompson, Carrie Burtnick.
Now, so at that point, so this would be kind of late 70s, early 80s, had aspirations of a Purple Heart and that kind of dream subsided? Like, you must have had that when you were young and coming up. Did you start to kind of at some point say, well, I'm a builder more so than a player, or did you always feel like, or you didn't really think about it that much?
We laugh because I would be 40 or 45, and Hackner's won a world championship, and Pat's won a world championship, Ryan and Furby and Walchuk, and we're sitting on the bed, and we're drunk and laughing and singing and partying, and I said, well, I'll be in the Hall of Fame. They all kind of look at me, a builder. Oh, it was a huge laugh. And
so they try to give you a little dig somehow or something?
Yeah. Well, they just looked at me because, I'm already 45, 50 thereabouts. How I'm going to get in the Hall of Fame with what I've accomplished at this point, curling, but I did get in the Hall of Fame, the Manitoba Curling Hall of Fame anyway, as a builder. It is interesting, but no, I always dreamed of going to the Brier, winning the Purple Heart, winning the World Championship. But again, one of the things I'll say that held me back from that is my childhood. Mm-hmm. I never got to play baseball, hockey, football, and all the sports that most of the kids get to play in the urban areas.
Yeah.
And so I didn't ever learn how to lose or win. And my dad was kind of a, strict man. And so I could never lose very good. I always had a hard time losing. It always looked like I could lose good, but I never played as good in the end game as I did in the early game. And that's why I can recognize not chokers, but guys that are not quite as good.
Like, so it just...
Stoughton played 85%. Start a game, end a game, blah, blah, blah. Maybe Gushu plays 85%, blah, blah, blah. But you had your guys like Rick Folk and Ed Wernick, Al Hackner. They would play 65 at the start of the game, but they'd play fucking 100% at the end of the game. You could not get those guys to miss at the end of the game. Al Hackner once said, it's not who I am, it's only what I do. And he felt very comfortable throwing that last rock. So I never learned how to lose, and I wasn't as good in the end game as I was. So I was a great player, but I couldn't finish the way some of these do.
There's an inner struggle that always, I think, occurs in any kind of sport, particularly sports that are very slow, right? Like baseball and golf in particular, and curling, where it's very static. You stand around, nothing's happening. You got to sit with yourself. You got to sit with your own mind in that moment. Like, think about what, Brad, as an example, must have been going on in his mind, sitting there in Newfoundland and St. John's at that moment. Kathy King talked a little bit about it. It was interesting. Like, that moment when you have to make the last shot, and it means so much, but you have to throw it like it means nothing.
Yes.
And like you say, Al seemed to have that ability.
Well, you take my son now. My son is an incredible last rock thrower. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that kid miss. I only played with him 3 or 4 times. He just started throwing rocks. He worked at the club and he threw rocks. And next thing you know, he wanted to play me one-on-one, and I'm laughing at him. I don't even play him. But then he ends up getting on our team. And I don't know. I just lost my confidence the first year he was on the team. And I said, guys, I wish there was something we could do because I don't really feel like throwing last rock. And Frenchie says, well, I don't want to throw it. And Mike says, well, I don't want to throw it. I said, Dad, I'll throw it.
Yeah.
And I put you at second to hide you. I didn't even think he was good enough to play lead. I didn't want to see him hogging that lead rock when the free guard zone and looking like an idiot on television. And we were on television a lot. So I actually hit him. Well, I was the opposite. He started throwing last rock. And next thing you know, within the year, we were going to the mixed championships, and we went like 11-0 in the Bonspiel with the Anyway, Nathan was so good at throwing last rock because he learned how to win and lose as a kid. As a matter of fact, he learned how to win and lose so much it almost didn't matter to him. So even the game he didn't bother to play. So even when you get too far, and you have too much competition, like he just played hockey, and he played everything. Even friggin' marbles and all that shit when he was just totally involved in sports. And because we sort of made him. So you can even overdo it.
It's like you get used to that moment, living with that moment where in 30 seconds I'm either going to be the GOAT or the hero, and you just learn how to live with it.
Yeah, like Stoughton. Gary Vandenberg says if Stoughton ever realized how fucking important that shot was, he'd never make it. Gary Vandenberg, as his second, said, Stouty, he has no idea. Yeah. He says he's dumb. He says if he ever realized how important that shot was, he never would have made it.
It's all, but that's almost kind of a smart way to think of it, right?
Yeah,
just take that out of it. And it's funny. I mean, I talked to Paul Savage about it just a little while ago, and he actually really enjoyed playing third for Eddie.
Yeah.
And it was never an issue. In fact, he found that he was happy to give away the duty of skipping. And like he said, how it just he was just giggling every time he get in the hack because I don't have to worry about that last shot.
That trip home.
Yeah, lots of guys. And, even...
that trip home after a miss, your last shot is so devastating.
Probably one of the most, famous Winnipeg skips of all time, Don Duguid, might have been a much better third. And they used to say that Don, in particular, I've talked to a few people that said he didn't always love that moment, being the guy throwing the last rock. Now, in particular, for 70-71, those guys were so good, I don't think he had a lot of stressful moments at the end of games. But for the most part, he really enjoyed curling more, I think, perhaps, when he didn't throw the last one.
And one thing that was even worse in the early days, we were the reps for the MCA. Mm-hmm. We had all their jackets.
Yeah.
So we would lose a final to Stoughton. We lost the mixed final to Stoughton. We lost the mixed final to Davies from Dauphin. We lost semi-final here. And to select, we lost to Mel Logan that year. I was with Billy Walsh. They would come in the next day and try on their jackets to go to the Nationals.
So you'd be the... and you'd
I'm
be
the guy. That was tough, believe me. You just lost their big loss on Sunday night.
So in other words, as they're shaking hands afterwards, they say, hey, Arnold, we'll see you tomorrow to pick up our jackets. Wow.
That was awful. I remember Rick Folk was a big account of mine. He'd won Saskatchewan, and we were playing Stoughton in the finals to go to Sault Ste. Marie. And a bunch of people who were counts of mine were going to this national, and we had beaten Stoughton twice, and we'd beaten them in the round robin, and we'd beaten them, I forget where, final of a bonspiel or something, and he had to beat us. No, I forget how the hell we'd beaten him anyway. And this game we had him again. I go to blank one in 9, miss it. It's so important to blank it because you're tied.
So you didn't even nose it. You just...
well, nosing it even
is
it's
not
great, so good because we went down coming home without. It was so important to blank it.
Yeah.
And he got... and he was one up coming home. Yeah. And we had a chance for our deuce, and I hit and rolled maybe half of... 6 inches too far, and he was able to pick it out, and we had to take one, and then he beat us in the extra end. But even in the extra end, he had to draw a full 4 on tough ice. But he comes in next day trying on the outfits, and if they're all... Anyway.
Okay, so is there a particular... is that one that sticks with you? Is there kind of a particular...
Yeah, Stoughton in the mix, we had a great team that year. That year I didn't drink. I took a year off drinking just for fun.
Yeah? So do you regret it in retrospect, or maybe...
No.
Yeah.
It was all good. I tell these kids even, pot smoking or whatever, if you do something, all I ask is that you take some time off to realize what the difference is and how different life is.
Did it change your curling at all? Like, did you notice
I think I had a better year in curling than I think one of the reasons Stoughton's been so successful is because he's a non-drinker.
Yeah.
And Kerry Burton is a great curler, but I'll tell you what, some Sunday mornings he wasn't ready to play, and I'm sure some of those Sunday mornings he lost games that he may not have lost had he not been a drinker.
Well, I like what Paul Savage talked about is sometimes the morning game you could get through. It's the third one in the day when you've been up the night before that would take a toll. So there used to be that real idea of not only do I want to win the bonspiel, I want to own the belt of the guy that can party harder than anybody else in the bonspiel.
That was Hockner.
Well, that's So who owns the belt? Let me ask, because you're probably
big time. Absolutely.
Okay, so
no hands
Paul
down,
Galzel,
no doubt. None of them.
Kerry Burtnick.
You ever interview Al Hackner and Paul Galzel, and Hackner will tell you.
Well, I chatted with Paul.
His very first Briar, I wrote a song. The Hack came back. The very first Briar I came to was in Calgary in 1980. Mm-hmm. Al, there was a storm, so we got there late. We got there about the 8th or 9th end. Al was 5 down playing 9. Yeah. And I didn't even bother. I thought, oh well, Northern Ontario's out or whatever. You're down 5 to Nova Scotia. Blah blah blah. Anyway, he got 4, stole the 10th, and the guy didn't have a shot in the 11th, and Al went to the final again. So I ended up writing a song, The Hack Came Back, part of that. But anyway, he went to Gausel's room every night, him and Bruce, and drank till 4 in the morning. They'd knock on his door, drink till 4 in the morning. They'd knock on his door, drink till 4 in the morning. Al says, we went back there the night after we beat him in the semis, knocked on his door. He was throwing the ball up the wall, and was hitting him in the head. He'd pick it up, throw it in the wall, and hit him in the head. But even Gausel,
Yeah.
Al just said, we knew that he was the big drinker. He was the big talk. He would smoke pot. He was the guy who could party. So you know what? We went there to fucking out party him and out curl him. And we did.
Well, yeah. In one of maybe it was Bob Weeks' book, but I thought they talked about the story there was that eventually Hackner they'd keep knocking on Gausel's door, and eventually at some point during the week the door was locked or something like that, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then he beat him in the semi. And went on to play Rick in the final, and he was like 8-3 against Rick, and came back, and Rick beat him 8-7. That was the first time I saw Hackner come back, and then he came back in the final. Mm-hmm. And the next time was in the Briar against Pat.
85, yeah.
Nobody had got 2 on Pat the whole week, and nobody had stolen on Pat. Mm-hmm. Al had to get 2 and steal 1 in the 9th and 10th, and he got 2 and stole 1. So I wrote the story. Now the hack came back. The very next end, the hack came back. Thought he was a goner, but the hack came back 'cause he couldn't stay away. Now the Briar Committee had troubles of their own. They had an old Indian skip who wouldn't stay at home. They tried and they tried to keep the hack away, so they spotted Ryan too in that final Briar day. But the hack came back. Very next end, the hack came back. Thought he was a goner, but the hack came back 'cause he couldn't stay away. Now he went on to Calvin Hall. Mm-hmm. That was the name of the arena in Perth, and he played Tim Wright in the semi, and he played the Swedes in the final. Now the Silver Broom Committee said they'd give the hack a fight, so they loaded up Calvin Hall with Swede Tim Wright. They waited and they waited for the hack to come around, but 97 pieces of the Swedes were all they found, 'cause the hack came back. The very next end, the hack came back. Thought he was a goner, but the hack came back 'cause he couldn't stay away. So...
Well, now I don't have to ask you to sing it for us, because I was going to. Always an inventor. We didn't have a guitar, so you just took whatever you had in front of you.
Oh, yeah. Around the rooms, there was always beer bottles and lighters. So
once you started the business, you'd probably make it a habit also of being. So you were at it, the 85 Briar as an example, where you.
One of the most interesting things I can say is that I believe you can do anything you want for a living. Look at the girl. You can do anything you want for a living. But I believe that you can do anything you want for a living. Give me another drink. No, just kidding. I am living proof. I'm 66 years old, and I dance for a living. Mm-hmm. So when I go to universities and places and talk about careers, or even in the World University Games, I spoke a couple of times. I was a keynote speaker. I was a keynote speaker here in Edmonton last week for David Nedohin. But the thing I stress is too many people choose jobs. Once you choose a job, you're in big trouble, because you get used to that money style, and you can't ever save enough money to live your passion. So you got to live your passion, and the money comes later. I had a great job for 10 years in geology with the mines and resources and a pension and blah, 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 whatever. And I started, I love curling, and I started doing this curling slider, and people thought I was absolutely nuts, especially these geologists that, I was a lab technologist, and I was even the boss in the lab, or whatever the hell it was called there. They don't call them bosses in the government, I don't think, but supervisor or whatever. And, but I walked away from all that because I ran across this curling slider. It was just a great slider, and I went into business, and I never looked back. So for 10 years I did that, and it was absolute magic, and I just loved my life, and I could work. And with the government, I would get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. I was supposed to be there at 8:30 or 9. I'd play cards half the day. I'd leave early. I looked for every excuse. I phoned in sick. I did everything. I was a terrible employee. But like I say, I became the boss because I worked for the government. But
so you were one of the exemplary employees, is what you're saying.
But there was no purpose in life. What we did was we drilled holes in the ground, and we brought the rock up, and we put it in core boxes, and we would then cut it into thin pieces and glue it to glass and grind it down and look at it through the microscope, and we would figure out whether it was orthoclase or plagioclase or what the hell was 20 feet below the surface and what was 200 feet below the surface. And to me, I had no interest in that.
Now, some people might have an interest in that, but if that's what they have...
Absolutely. Some people are very passionate about that, and it's wonderful.
They're even willing to work for the government to do that.
Absolutely, and I have nothing against those people. As a matter of fact, I really respect those people that can do a lot of that work. But, all of a sudden, when I ran across this curling slider and I started selling it, I could work till 14 hours a day. And I remember working till 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, sanding down shoes, which was manual labor compared to what I was doing with the government, but I loved it, and I could do it for hours, and I couldn't stop talking curling. I did that for 10 years. Yeah. But after you do something for a few years, you get a little nut bored, but I saw something else I wanted to do, and I saw these guys playing every weekend. Now I'm 30 or 32 years old, whatever the case may be, and I think, well, what the hell? So I started practicing every day and working at it, and I know what you put in, you get out. And so even I rented a club after the season ended, like I say, and played a ton. And next thing you know, I'm playing every weekend, and that's how I'm promoting my business and talking to players and finding out what's working and what doesn't. And, I knew the brooms and that inside out and the sweeping and so I did that for 10 years.
Well, let me ask you about that, because you were there at the sort of the dawn of the push broom, right?
Yeah.
So what was your take on it then when push brooms were coming in versus corn? And
well, to be honest with you, I've never been big in brooms, if you notice. It's always been shoes.
Yeah.
It's always been shoes. I always thought if both guys sat on the bench and just played the game and there was no sweeping, it'd be a better game. I just felt that most of the stuff, when the rocks picked and everything else, it was from people being up and down the ice.
Yeah.
And the corn brooms just made a mess of the ice completely. So I was never big on sweeping or what sweeping did. I thought it was all theory, and I didn't think sweeping actually did much. Now I'm beginning to realize how much it does because of all these.
Well, last year in particular was pretty interesting.
But if we look back on the corn, anyway, to get back to, I did that for a few years, and I started playing, and I played for about 10 years and promoted my business that way. And then when I was 50 years old, to be honest with you, I felt I wasn't really interested in seniors. I don't know why. I played seniors a little bit, but I wasn't really interested in seniors, and I felt I was almost ready to sit down on the couch with my remote control and watch TV and get ready to die. And then I ended up being introduced to this dancing, which I always did, so it wasn't, but I could always jig. And so John gave me a call and asked me to come and dance, and I said, oh my God, no, John. He says,
John
Morrisseau.
Okay.
He said, well, your sister says you can jig. I said, well, I can jig, John, but I'm not coming out, no. And he says, well, I guess we'll have to cancel practice because we need 4 to practice and there's only 3 and we got a gig on Friday. I said, oh, John, I'll come and give you a hand and tonight. So I went out to help him just to be a spare, and the fiddle started and the jiggy started, and goddamn, I got hooked on that like I got hooked on curling. And the next thing you know, 16 years later, I'm still dancing for a living, and I'm 66 years old, and it's probably added years to my life because it's completely changed my life. And at curling, I've supplied a lot of great product to a lot of great people like Burtnick and Stoughton and Hackner and Wernick and blah, blah, blah. The list goes on, and probably helped the game and made shots and even invented the number system, as you say. I've changed the game. You couldn't even slide over the hog line before I started doing sliders. So I've had a big impact on the game. But in the dance, we are saving lives. Our purpose in the dance is to bring hope to the kids in the Aboriginal communities because they're growing up with no self-esteem. And when they see these kids, 3 of our kids won Canada's Got Talent, for example. When they see these kids being successful, it gives them some hope that they can be successful because most of these communities fiddle and jig. So when they see the Stompers, going to the Olympics, and we did 6 performances at the Olympics, and we've been to Mexico, and we've been to Scotland, and we've been to around the world. I mean, it gives these kids hope that it can be done. So most of these kids in these communities are living with no self-esteem. And I just want to carry that a little further. Because in 1947, the law changed and Aboriginal people were allowed to own private property. Up until that point, you couldn't own private property. I always thought my dad was a bigot because he would never admit we were Aboriginal, but I didn't realize till I got more educated that he only did what he had to do. In those days, you couldn't admit you were Aboriginal. You might have your kids taken. He already owned private property and had 4 kids, so he couldn't admit he was Aboriginal. In 1951, again, the law changed and Aboriginal people were allowed off the reserve without a permit. And nobody knew how to fill out a permit in those days. I mean, my dad couldn't even read or write. 1953, again, the law changed. Aboriginal people were allowed into public parks. You couldn't even go into a public park with your little 5-year-old. You saw another 5-year-old playing, he'd have to say, no, we're Indian. We can't go in there. 1957, allowed to carry currency, and 1963, allowed to vote. I was already 13 years old, and 50 years later now we're saying, what the hell's the matter with you people? I mean, I'm not First Nations, and I'm not Caucasian. I'm Métis, I'm sort of half, and I see the way the Aboriginal people live, and I see the way the white people live, and I know who needs help, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and we are making a big impact in the Aboriginal community. So, like I say, when you're passionate about something, you can do almost anything you want in your life, and you'll get paid for it. And we do. We get paid big for the dance. I mean, we get sometimes $12,000 to go dance for an hour. I used to have to play for a whole goddamn weekend. in curling,
a few $100
playing well to make $12,000, and I didn't do it very often. We split it amongst more people, and there's more cost to it as well. So anyway, sorry I got off on that.
That's all right. No, that's all right.
That's just telling people you can do anything you want for a living, no matter what age.
So if you define yourself, do you think you're more of a? Because I see you in a number. You're an inventor. You've been a curler. But I also see you as kind of a showman or an entertainer, or when people are saying a briar patch or something like, or an event, they might want to see the curlers, but I always knew that people say, oh, where's Arnold? That's the guy they're going to want to see, and you're always going to tell a story or play a song or...
I see myself as an opportunist. Hackner says, Arnold, sure I'm popular this year because I won the World Championship last year, but you're popular every year. But Al's so respectful. That guy, he has so much admiration for everybody. I mean... he's one of the greatest guys in the world and the most celebrated Aboriginal. He's First Nations, and he's never been given credit for 2 world championships amongst the Aboriginal people who really promote their winners. And I was Aboriginal Leader of the Year for Canada in 1995 or something. I mean, it's nothing compared to what Al had done.
You and Al did coverage together. When was that? During the
Olympics, yeah.
That was good stuff.
Oh my God, we loved that.
You guys were great, and I thought
that was good fun. But when I say I see myself as an opportunist, even right now, at 66, I've just set a goal to win an Olympic medal in 6 years' time, and I set that goal because I'm an opportunist. This Aboriginal dance, my God, I saw how well it was accepted. I went to a competition in Peguis, 1,500 people under an open-air arena with 20 groups with a full band dancing. Amazingly exciting. 4 to 6 hours you could watch this stuff. And my God, the Aboriginal people get so much negative publicity. I just thought, you know what? The world has to see this. Now, the Aboriginal people they're not as assertive as I am. They're very laid back. And so I was able to reach the top very quickly and recruit all the best dancers and blah, blah, blah. But I also see the same thing in curling. With coaching professional baseball for a couple of years, I see how hard those guys work. And I see how they break down the swing and the slide and I know how they break down the swing and the throw and the stretch, and it's just like these guys are professionals. They've been playing ball for years and years and years, and they're 30 years old, and they're still hitting off batting tees. They're hitting off soft toss. Curlers, I mean, my God, we spend no time in this game. We don't break it down. So again, I'm an opportunist.
So do you still think in curling, even though we've reached another level in the last decade easily, you're saying we're still not even
close to what
not even close to where it could be.
Not even close to what we're going to reach. You wait until you see this next team that we put together. Not only am I putting this team together, but we will say you beat us. It'll raise the whole level of the game again because these kids right now, this Dowry is incredible, and so is Colton, and they're getting a guy out of Regina, Pat Simmons, who is 2-time world champion, and he's buying into the program. And I tell you what, Simmons might not work as hard as these kids, and he might not have to. And maybe he won't be the guy that'll win in 2002 with them. Who knows? I mean, very few stick together for 6 years. But I can tell you what, these 2 kids and 3 kids, Rob Gordon and the other guys that are buying into this program, and we're going to have a corporate team, and they're going to also run this curling academy that we're starting. We're paying kids to curl, but China's doing it, and Korea's doing it, and Japan's doing it, where these kids are playing full time. And if we don't do it, we're going to be soon sitting on the back burner. So again, I want to be on the front lines.
We've sort of grown curling through the grassroots, and one, because there was so many, right? I mean, you got 1,100 clubs across Canada or whatever the number is. So at some point, and you have all these teams in playdowns. Well, now there aren't teams in playdowns. Now there's fewer and fewer teams that actually are trying to get to that next, to get to the level to compete with the Idines and so forth, you have to become nearly a professional team. Because they are. So how else are you going to try to battle that? And I do think that there's sort of there's a challenge for Canada on the horizon if we don't figure out what that is. I mean, the flip side to it is we're kind of struggling on the other end of the game. Like we talked before the microphones were on a little bit about Winnipeg and lost some clubs and things are started to change, right? So that I don't know. So where do you see that then? Where the game had to like you're talking about a high performance team and focusing on the Olympics, but at the same time, what do you see about where the rest of curling is going to go?
Well, I still see I helped get curling into the Olympics. Not a whole ton, but I did a lot with Ray Kingsmith to help get curling into the Olympics. I was founder of the World Curling Players Association, co-founder of the World Curling Tour. We didn't just try to build curling in our we didn't try to just build our curling business. We tried to build curling. And we may have even heard it to some degree at the same time as we were improving it, because the ratings on television are amazing, and at the top level, it's very healthy. I mean, we're second only to the Grey Cup in ratings, and the Grey Cup is our national drunk. The TV is on that station, regardless of whether you're watching it or not. I mean, half the people in the room are not even interested.
Well, and if you add up the Brier final and the Scotties final, I think you surpassed the Grey Cup. If you counted that as sort of one of,
If you added the two finals together.
For sure.
But the Brier is second only to the Grey Cup in ratings. And so the game is very healthy at the top level, but we have hurt it at the bottom level because at one time there used to be 27 curling clubs in Winnipeg, and they all had a waiting list to get in the 80s and 90s. However, in the 90s, 700 sheets of ice closed across Canada. Now there's 15 curling clubs in Winnipeg instead of 27, and they're all looking for members. So that tells you what's happened to curling at the grassroots level. However, I do see now, and I also think, and I said today, that we have taught our kids how to curl, but we haven't taught our kids how to volunteer. At one time, in the junior program, there used to be 5 or 6 people on the committee recruiting kids, and there was he put the program together and the whole bit. Now there's one person calling kids, trying to get them out. And I went and shook hands with a girl today at the Saville Center because I heard her say to this young girl, well, lessons are changing for next week. And I just went and congratulated her and said, you know what? We need so many more people like you, because that's all it takes. There's so many people who want to curl and want to give it a try, but there's nobody out there to, even the curling clubs. Big sign on the door that says no street shoes. Well, how are you going to curl? There's no, you don't walk into a bowling alley and they say no street shoes. You have to rent shoes. Well, the Europeans are all buying our rental shoe big time. Oh, yeah. Some of the clubs have 80 pairs of rental shoes. All the clubs in Canada yet, there's very few of them that have any rental shoes, but they all got signs in the door that say no street shoes. So how welcoming is that for kids? So everybody a lot of people want to curl. They just don't know how to get into it. We just got to figure out. And Curl Canada now has done, in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have to do any advertising. I mean, the clubs were full. Yeah. Now, we realize that 2005 or 2008, that something's got to be done because curling's dropping. So we're starting to do a lot more now. And I think curling will be healthy in the next few years again. But it'll be more like baseball and hockey. There'll be the professional level, and there'll be the next level and the next level. Because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you could still get 50, 60 teams to a Bonspiel because we all had a chance to win before the free guard zone and before these guys were playing 5 days a week and just triple knockout and all that stuff. So I also said the triple knockout would kill the Bonspiels, and it has.
Why did you say that?
When Stoughton and Burtnick boycotted Portage, I wrote an article, and I can still show you the article to this day.
What was the story? So we'll go back to
the story is that we could all go play at one time. We would fly in on Friday, play Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and we were back at our jobs on Monday. But all of a sudden, if you're going to play a triple knockout, it's an extra 2 days. And if those guys would realize how much that extra 2 days cost you for that one game, they cost you extra days in the hotel, it cost you extra days off work, it cost you. But all these big players did the voting because they were the ones at the Bonspiels, and they all voted for triple knockouts.
When did that take place? When was that?
Was that 10, 15 years ago. So 95 and thereabouts, those years, Portage was still running. It was the last good double knockout where you could go in and could play. So we were all playing every week. And before the free guard zone, when you played a double knockout, you could win 3 games in a row and qualify and get your money back once in a while. But once the triple knockout came and all these big teams were playing 5 days a week, the average teams were playing only every other weekend because that's all they could do. They didn't have jobs. They didn't choose jobs that
I hadn't even
5 days a week.
I hadn't even thought of that. That makes a whole lot of sense.
And so there was a big split. Now you can't get 32 teams to a Bonspiel because these 10 or 15 teams from the local group will not contribute. At one time we could put in $1,000 entry. We had a chance of getting it back, but if we didn't, we had some great games and some great experience and whatever. But you can't even do that anymore. It's just a donation now. So I say that triple knockout ruined the big Bonspiel that we were.
Well, okay, so take me back then to when the early days of the tour. So I did have a conversation with Ed Lukowich for a bit, and some of what he had started doing. He told me stories about putting out letters to typing up and putting out letters to people and licking all the envelopes in the early days of when he was trying to get a tour going. So what was your involvement? Ed Lukwich. No, it was Ed Lukwich.
Oh, Lukwich, yeah.
So what was your involvement when? So this would go back to the time when, I guess probably even early 80s, right? When there was what was your first conversation, I guess, about
I take credit for the
tour.
World Curling Tour because I started. We actually, Ed Lukwich called it the Canadian Curling Tour. And we had John Quajan, we had Eugene Hritzik. And Hritzik dropped off after 6 months or a year, I forget what. But the three of us stayed on for quite a while.
And
it was the Canadian Curling Tour.
But sorry, what was the year? What was the year about that again?
1990.
Was it up to 90? Okay, so it was late 80s when.
89, I started the World Curling Players Association, and I had a bunch of people out to meetings. Chris, Oris Melchuk, Bonstein, a few of them, and they said, "You know what? This has all been tried before." I said, "I don't care if it's been tried."
Yeah, because it had been talked about in the 70s. I've heard people talk about it. There was Bronstein was part
they
of those
started
conversations.
the Players Association,
but never got anywhere or didn't really.
Never got anywhere. But I was talking to Al Hackner, and he says, "Arnold, it's probably cost me $50,000 to go to 10 Briars." I went, "Holy shit! What do you he says, it's probably cost me $5,000 a Briar because you take your wife, you take your kids, you get And I'm thinking, my God, and a week off work and blah blah blah. And I'm thinking that's terrible. And yet the Briars were big and they were making money as far as I could see. So that's when we started the Players Association. And these guys had said, "Well, it's all been done before. It's all been tried before." I said, "I don't care. We'll make it work." And we did. However it worked, we made it work. And even the World Curling Tour, I will not take credit for the tour idea because that was Mark Olson, Kerry Burdick, and I forget who else. I think even Ron Gauthier. I'm not sure, but they formed a Manitoba Curling Tour. And all it was these guys said, "You know what? Some of these bonspiels are at the same time, and we can't go to both. And then there's 2 weeks when there's nothing, and we'd like to play in them all. And why don't we just get together and great idea." And then I thought, well, why the hell not do that worldwide or Canadian-wide anyway? So I called Ed Lukwich, and he came to Winnipeg for one of the World Curling or the Manitoba Curling Tour events at Assiniboine. I think I played with him. And he said, "Yeah, that is a great idea." So we just started. We called it the Canadian Curling Tour first, and within a month I said, "Well, we're silly to call it the Canadian Curling because Europeans were playing in some of the bonspiels, so we should call it the World Curling Tour." And so we call it the World Curling Tour, and away we go. And that's
and so at some point, I think Ed was involved a little bit at one point, and then he left it. And then so at some point, did it just become you that were very much involved, or who kind of owned the tour, if you will, in terms of an ownership? I don't know if that
here's another goofy situation.
Yeah,
the World Curling Tour. Had we not won the Granite, the World Curling Tour might not ever have been.
Might
never have continued
if you hadn't which.
But we won the Granite Bonspiel.
Okay. Oh, sorry. By winning the Granite Bonspiel. Okay. So what happened?
We won it used to be the Pacific Western. But anyway, we won that Bonspiel with David Nedohin. Ed Lukwich, I realized, had called 2 weeks earlier and canceled the World Curling Tour Championships in Selkirk. I said, "Ed, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, we can't get television, can't get money, we can't get whatever." He said, "I was just kind of willing to drop the whole thing." And I went, "Bullshit. Now that we've won, we qualified for the World Curling Tour Championship. There's going to be a friggin' championship."
Yeah. So if you hadn't qualified, you wouldn't have cared so much.
I went out and met with Selkirk. And they said, "Well, yeah, if you're still involved and you're still willing to sponsor, I said, "Of course, nothing's changed as far as I'm concerned." Ed had sort of a year or two earlier had sort of dumped me, but I was running the World Curling Players Association, and he was running the World Curling Tour, and we were back and forth, and we had an executive director, and he said, "Well, why don't I just do the whole thing, because, it's getting blah, 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 whatever." And he more or less took it over. I didn't even accept the fact that he wanted both. But anyway, he took it over, and within a couple of years, I guess it was kind of fallen by the wayside. So anyway, I say we won that. I went to Selkirk, and they said, "Well, you're still involved." I said, "Absolutely, I'm still involved." And yes, we're going to have it, and yes, we're going to go. And I paid TSN 20. We won the fucking Bonspiel. I'm going to pay TSN $25,000 to televise it.
Yeah,
and we did.
Hackner paid $50,000 for 5 Briars, and you paid or 10 all those Briars, and you paid how much for that Bonspiel?
For one Bonspiel, $25,000, and 32 teams. No, we won. Yeah, we won the Granite.
Won the Granite. Yeah.
And then the Granite qualified us for the Manitoba Curling Tour Championships. Yeah. We won the Manitoba Curling Tour Championships, and we ended up going to Switzerland. We won Switzerland, and we were leading the World Curling Tour for a while with Nedohin, and that was the best team I ever had.
You're beaming right now, even just thinking about it. That was a great.
Well, I'm thinking how funny it is when,
Yeah. Do you? By the way, do you ever ask Randy that he should be buying you a drink? Because it's like you sent Nedohin over there, and mind you, he's the guy that figured out maybe Dave should throw last rock. Maybe if you'd have figured that out earlier, who knows?
I definitely have to say that. If I made a mistake in my life, it was not recognizing the fact that David should be throwing that rock.
Yeah. But you think about it, not a lot of people did that back then, right? I mean, it was pretty rare a guy would hold a broom and then throw some other rocks. I mean, it was, and if it was done, it was kind of, he's a little bit up there in years, we'll let him throw lead or set, but it was never a competitive team.
And I don't think Furby wanted to throw last.
Yeah.
And I wanted to throw last.
Did you? Yeah.
That was the difference. Yeah. I remember Furby calling me and saying, is Nedohin good enough? Absolutely. Furby, Nedohin's good enough. And he says, is he good enough to throw last? And I said, yes, he's good enough to throw last. I never thought of that, but he said, well, I want to skip, but I'll let him throw last.
Well, I mean, part of it is I think if until you've started throwing last, you don't know if a guy's really got it in that moment, right?
I knew David could adjust anyway.
Yeah.
Because I knew the kind of kid he was. Now, here's another one for you. You got to be careful of what you say about people and expose people to it. Two kids that won Canada's Got Talent, Brandon and Dallas Kershane, they lost their house when they were 2 and 3 years old or 3 and 4 years old. I don't know whether they burned down or whether they couldn't make the payments or what happened. They lost their house, they said. Well, guess where they went and lived? In a dance hall. The dance hall had a shower and it had the kitchen and it had whatever. And they were allowed to live in the dance hall in that community for the next 3 or 4 years. And every morning when they woke up, there was their dance floor and their parents were dancers. So they danced and they danced and they danced. Well, here we are with John Meade. I'm sitting in the hot tub. He's playing with Dave Smith. And
trunks, sorry, there are trunks on, right? Just checking.
Trunks on, yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I won't be telling those other stories. There were trunks on. And I said to David, I don't know whether Stoughton was there or not, but I know Gary Vandenberg was there and John Meade. And I said, John was playing with Smith, Dave Smith at the time. I said, John, you were one of the best thirds in the world. He said, oh my God, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I said, John, you were one of the best thirds in the world. Like 4 or 5 years later now, he loses the final or he wins the Worlds with Stoughton.
Yeah.
He did.
They lost the Worlds that time, and then they won it again years later. But
I said, see, John, I told you. He said, Arnold, I don't know whether you were right or whether you telling me made me one of the best thirds in the world. Now, here's David and Sean. I always said David will be a world champion from the very first time, 21, 22 years old, and he's playing with me. I said, David will be a world champion. Ray Turnbull says, what the hell are you talking about, Arnold? He says this. Now, you don't just become a world champion like that. I said, David will become a world champion, Ray. Yeah. He called me up when David did miss that shot. Remember when he was going to be a world champion, he missed that shot, rolled out against Switzerland. And Ray called me up and said, Arnold, Jesus Christ, you're right. He almost won the world championship. I said, Ray, he'll still win it. Yeah. And he came back and won it after. Yeah. Ray always gives me credit for that, being able to pick out. And same with McEwen will win a world championship. And I said it when he was 18, 19, he'll win a world championship. But anyway, when you expose people, and now Sean Nedohin never said much about Sean. Sean was probably a better player than David.
And a great kid, super guy, really. Absolutely, I mean, everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there was something about David that I felt, maybe it wasn't even fair. It was only my opinion, but it could have changed those two kids' lives. Sean almost dropped out of curling, and David went on to win 3 worlds.
Well, I think because I grew up growing up with them a little bit, right, from the junior side. Dave is clearly the guy that was willing to throw 200 rocks a day and wanted to do it day in, day out, and never get bored of that.
Yes.
Not everybody, wants to do that. That takes a lot, and to do it, and then not only that, but to do it well and with purpose and get better.
We practiced so much that we threw spinners. We threw the rock halfway down the ice. We hit the boards halfway down the ice. We threw this. We practiced so much that we practiced everything and anything. We would try putting 16 rocks between the hack and the hog line without any of them touching.
Oh, yeah.
You'd throw all 16 rocks and you'd put the first one just in front of and then you'd freeze, and you'd freeze, and you'd freeze, and you'd freeze, all touching the center line. It was a game we played. And it was crazy. And we played like 55, the equivalent of 55 games one weekend, with just playing one-on-one and stuff. It was amazing. We just went and went and went. And what you put in, you get out. And he continued that in Edmonton with Furby. And Furby is a big guy to practice. But Furby's one of the smartest guys in the game, obviously.
Yeah.
And one of the most decorated. But again, they did things differently than every other team. And so
what do you think about what Gushu came up with, before last season? So the season before, when they started testing the brooms and with the more abrasive brooms, and they started figuring out one sweeper worked. Like, that almost seems like something you might have figured out. But I guess maybe, like you mentioned earlier, you never really took as much of a shine at the sweeping side. That wasn't the...
We should send him our video.
Or was there something... Okay, what...
I was talking about this in 2000. I knew I have it on the video that I sent out to all my customers talking about this. It was called the boomerang.
Okay, yeah.
Now, there's the rock, and when you have these brooms facing like this, look at the open area in here and the open area in here.
Yeah.
Right?
It is on.
But if you turn it this way.
I'm looking, yeah.
But if you turn it this way, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And now, the biggest thing is when you turn it that way, then you have the next one, they can fit right together. Now, when the CCA did those tests and spent $2 billion fucking dollars, excuse my language, they said that the front sweeper only did 10%. So I tried to put the two sweepers together, so we invented these brooms that almost fit together. They did fit together. Oh, yeah. And the guys on each side, it would be like the old days of sweeping. Now, we could never get anybody to spend any time at it because, first of all, I kind of semi-retired from the game right after I invented it. We could never find any guys that would spend enough time at it. But you didn't just go out and sweep with the corn brooms in sync. You practiced in your basement, and you practiced in your basement, and you went out and practiced with your partner, and you worked, and you worked, and you worked. And you got into this thing, which we could have done but nobody would have spent that kind of time at it. So, yes, back in those days, we were talking about that, and we were talking about corner sweeping. And in 1995, when I coached Chris Galbraith at the World Championships, is when we figured out all this, how the rock follows the broom.
Yeah. Well, I even heard, I can't remember who it was, one of these conversations I've had, somebody even talked about, might have been the hammer or the brownie back in the early days when they first came out, people suspecting that they could just sort of, somehow they were keeping it straighter or something, just more so than the horsehair or hoghair brooms were.
Yes.
And but I don't know. The concept of the single sweeper, I think, was pretty profound from Gush's standpoint, right?
That was profound. That's
but think about it. Back in the day, but you remember back in the day, and this is why I was surprised that no one figured it out. Back in the day, sometimes there was two people on the same side. You remember those days?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You would have thought then weird stuff would happen when you had two guys on the same side. But I don't really recall back then that, you saw it, like where a rock all of a sudden might just curl more than...
Well, I can tell you why it didn't happen back in those days. The ice was always straight and falls. You couldn't see...
You don't have this big 4.5, 5 feet swing everywhere or more.
You couldn't figure out what was going on because there was no... Remember all the world championships and everything overseas was totally dead straight ice. You couldn't get around anything. You just peeled everything. That was the other thing. They peeled the whole game. So they were hardly drying. So, but the thing that surprises me is these horsehair brooms being banned now.
Well, now
they've been around for 100 years.
Well, what happens when there's frost? I mean, last year in Ottawa, when it started raining in Ottawa and the ice conditions changed, I think it was Wednesday night. I mean, there was some weird stuff going on. And I always remember thinking, if they'd had, hair brooms in that moment, they could have controlled the situation a little bit. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I think where they're going with this idea of creating...
Hans Lutridge, he said that.
Yeah, I still think that's so.
That was a stupid thing they did, man, in the corn.
Because the difference, and there's a difference between a hog hair and a horsehair, right? And I know you're not a broom guy, you say, but you probably know.
No, I'm a broom guy more than the average curler.
So you don't want to say here officially that you don't want to sell brooms. That's not what you're saying here on this.
Oh no,
podcast.
We got the best broom right now. It's going to be $300.
Okay, good. All right, that's what I thought you'd say. Okay, but the hog hair, remember?
Just got approved last week.
Well, the thick kind of gorse hog hair, the one that was almost like a big mat of hair. I don't see how that thing actually would create a problem on the ice surface. What started happening is people would start using that hog hair, the synthetic. Mm-hmm. It's not even an animal anymore, right? It's just a synthetic hair, and you could literally start to trim hairs out and create...
Whole line again. They mixed the hog hair and the horse hair. I'm not the hog hair. The synthetic hair with the horse hair, and that was the most effective.
So now, because then you can start putting scratches on the ice. But
and that's what Howard, even though he was the biggest complainer about the horsehair, that's what they used in the provincials when we went and watched them.
Well, I think at one point
I was down there watching them, and where was it?
Oh, last year.
Brantford? No, the year before last, not last year.
Oh, 2 years.
He's sponsored by Balance Plus, but he was goal line hog hair because they were the most effective. And
that was last season, not this season. If that's
right.
What I mean. Yeah.
Right. He won he went to the Brier again, and then by the Brier time they couldn't use them, but he used them in playdowns. He complained most about them.
Well, but I think it became a point, right, where everybody goes, well, if everyone's going to use them, I guess I better, if I'm going to compete. So, yeah. So I still don't know if that whole
There you go. If it's against your etiquette, do you do it?
Well, here's the thing. I think this season now, it's certainly improved, but I don't think everything's, I don't know if this is the end state yet. We'll still, hopefully we start doing a little more research and study. I still find it fascinating that for a game that's 400 years old or whatever, 500 years old, nobody really figured this out until 2016.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Push
100%.
brooms, even though push brooms were only in Canada since the late 70s, I mean, they were actually around from the 20s. They were using them in Europe for forever, right? So
I agree with you 100%. It's how the hell, after 100 years of using the horsehair, we used to think that the Europeans were nuts. And that's why we could beat them. We were using the corn and they were using the horsehair. It was exactly the opposite. We were beating them in spite of the fact that we were at a total disadvantage with the corn when they were using hair. And Gausel proved that completely, and so did Ed Lukowicz. There was guys that rebutted it or didn't agree with it, and they in vain tried to use corn and went nuts, and they have no chance against the hair because hair can move corn, but corn can't.
Anything else we didn't cover? What else you want to touch on? I know something I like to
ask.
What
happened at Pinky's last night?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
What? I got a question for you because I always like to ask this. What's some good examples of gamesmanship that you've seen out there when you were playing, or even as a spectator, or stories that you've heard?
Well,
guys
you know what?
And you don't have to name names if you don't want to.
Letting Carter throw that rock a couple of years ago.
Which one? Oh, the
Cooley and those guys letting Carter throw that rock over a couple of years ago. That was great gamesmanship. And I tell you what, I look at Cooey and those guys as very, very gentlemen. He doesn't talk much, etc. But those guys are great guys. Yeah. And they are play the game very, very fair.
So I was talking about the guys that don't play fair. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, well, there's been some guys. I mean, Kevin Martin, I played him a few times when I questioned some of the things he's done. We drew for 2 one time, and he took a rock off and gave us 1, which made a big difference. Instead of us being one up coming home, we're tied coming home.
Well, that's always a weird experience. Was this a moment where like a rock was touched late or something, or what was
touched when it stopped and was touched? I mean, it was obviously made, and
that's what's strange. Like they say in curling, I almost appreciate about the sport, but it makes it tough on the player because if you call the guy, you're an asshole, and if you let it slide, someone's going to get on you for it. So depending on the situation, it's so gray, right?
And I've seen Jones in Selkirk, I think it was, that made a call.
What was the story in Selkirk? Because I've heard about that since, but I've never.
Well, they made the shot and got one, and Jones would have been up 3-2 with. Instead of that, they said that she touched the guard going by, and she wouldn't have made the shot. And Jones got 3, and now all of a sudden she's up 6-2. I have no idea what the score exact details were, but I tell you, I lost a little respect for the situation just because they were going to win anyway, and it was a local team, and it was.
But you got to appreciate though that it is tough. Like the sport itself creates that moment, which I think as a fan is kind of interesting because most sports don't have that. In fact, nearly every other sport, an official is going to call it. In fact, you see in golf, used to be in golf, the idea is you call on yourself. That's not happening anymore in the PGA Tour. Now that look what happened to Dustin Johnson in the U.S. Open a few years ago, right? They go and call it anyway. So curling is still this one where it's 2 teams, and again they're battling each other. They're not golfing with their own scorer, and yet you're asked to be. So if you're so it almost puts your own character on display in that moment.
Well, I still say
it's kind of interesting.
I still say it's a gentleman's game. We shake hands before the game.
Mm-hmm.
We throw 20 handshakes each. We go into a handshake after every delivery, and we shake hands at the end of a game. And you know what? To me, still, I respect people who will even take a loss over. One of the worst things I ever saw happen was when those Cooey boys lost that junior championship way back when they were 14, 16 years old. And Warren Hansen, who should never have been in there, came out and gave them the win, gave the Alberta team the win when he was from Alberta.
Yeah, what was the situation again?
Northwest Territories. Those Cooey boys were 14 and 16, I think.
No, I remember but I don't remember the exact situation or what.
Well, they celebrated. They kicked the rock.
Oh, okay,
but they kicked it away, and it still was shot. But if they touched it, they'd obviously won. And so that was one of the worst things I ever saw. And I'm not even sure about Oris Malchuk in that deal.
The Labonte.
Because that wasn't as profound it wasn't as obvious. Whether or not, I think everybody, and when you look back at it, Labonte is as famous as anybody. Who's Jean Lascarius? Do you remember Jean Lascarius?
No.
Jean Lascarius won the Worlds in Regina. Over the Regina guy. He was a great Regina player at the time. Anyway, Jean Lascarius is not nearly as famous as Bob Labonte, who lost the final to Oris Malchuk on the kicked rock.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Even I go down to the bar.
We'll always remember Jean Van de Velde. If he had won the British Open, I don't know that we'd remember Jean Van de Velde. But what happened to him and the whole situation and that picture of him standing in the burn there on 18, that will always be remembered, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Any other stories that you think you can what's the best story that you can probably share, but you're not quite sure if you should from an event or There's got to be a Hackner story somewhere there that you're not sure.
Oh, God, there's lots and lots of Hackner stories and lots. There's stories about everybody.
Yeah.
Savage was a character.
But Hackner's got the belt, you said, without a doubt.
Hackner's got the belt. As far as I get. Oh, yeah.
Who other than yourself, who could sort of hold court, like at a patch or in an environment that would be just keep people laughing and keep people entertained? And
Savage is funny.
Yeah.
Savage is a great bit of character. He's a great character of the game. Burtnick was a great guy. I mean, he partied a lot, had a lot of fun in his day. I mean, he started so young. You know, the best friends I ever had in curling, and I've been around this game I've been in business for 40 years, but even further. The best friends I ever had in curling were Al Hackner, number one, Randy Furby, and Don Walchuk. And they were the guys that I went to Yellowknife with and won the bearskin rugs, $32,000. I still got that bearskin rug. I still adore it to this day. Matter of fact, I took a picture with his jacket in front of the bearskin rug. I won a couple other bonspiels with those guys, but they were just every bonspiel we went to, and it was even before we went to bonspiel together.
Yeah.
But every bonspiel we went to, we always hung out together. We always were glad to see each other. We always shared stories. We always shared a drink. We always had fun. I had fun with the Howards, and I had fun with Rich.
So maybe it'd be harder to say, like, is there anyone you hadn't had fun with, Arnold? Or you? I guess the key would be you always had fun.
Yeah, there were guys, that to me didn't live the game. They were there, basically to win. Kevin and I never really ever associated much together.
Despite the fact that he is another guy that's made curling a business.
Oh my God!
Right?
And
one of the first, right, to really make a life out of the game.
And probably the best player the game's ever seen. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, I think Glenn Howard's the best player the game ever seen. Rick Lang didn't have the longevity of Russ Howard, but Rick is another guy who's just a total friend of mine. I mean, we crashed his New Year's party a couple years ago. He didn't even know we were coming. We just showed up.
You just showed up
and
you just
knocked on his door.
Just showed up in Thunder Bay.
Yeah. Just showed up in Thunder Bay. No, we flew to Thunder Bay to crash his party. It was.
You knew it was happening though, right? Because
he has a party.
If he'd have been in Palm Springs, that wouldn't have been so good.
Every New Year's he has a party, and we flew there and crashed his party.
Well, we should probably head over we get the draw starting here right away. We should probably head over. And all of our guests here, I should mention. So we have, do you want to introduce everybody else that's here? So we can, that's been so quiet and polite.
Andrew Rago, my son-in-law. First guy that's ever married any of my, first marriage I've had in my family. And Kate, Andrew and Kate.
Yeah.
And then my wonderful high school sweetheart here that we connected 3 years ago. There's a story I'll tell you.
That's awesome.
To give all the kids out there belief and spirit. Yeah, you can put it on. 3 years ago, this is a good story. Mm-hmm. 3 years ago, I pulled up to the valet parking at the airport. I saw this girl getting out of her vehicle. I couldn't wait to get out and tell her how good she looked. She says, "Thank you." And I said, and I went to walk away. Yeah. And she says, "Are you Arnold Asham?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, I'm Valerie Hankey." Well, Valerie Hankey was my high school sweetheart. Ray married Audrey, Stan married Louise, Vince married Stacy. They all married their high school sweethearts.
Yeah.
This girl wouldn't marry me. 45 years later, here we are. In a hotel room, being interviewed by you.
All right.
My two kids. There's my story. And I'm sticking to it.
This was good. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you.